So we're here with Peter Carter, who is in Victoria, British Columbia. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
How's the weather there? Are you having heat waves like you were last year?
We are not, Guy. For me, we're having the most wonderful, beautiful weather. But it's pretty unusual. It's cool. It's cool. But the sun's bright and it's just wonderful, actually. But it's not how it should be.
Right. What should it be this time of year?
Well, normally, it'd be pretty warm here this time of year.
Okay.
But I have a heat sensitivity, so I always have to stay out of the sun anyway. But no, it's just lovely, I must say.
Peter, what's going on? Like Europe's under heat wave at the moment, and one of the slides that I saw on social media was a picture that somebody had captured from some years ago, where the forecasters were projecting what the weather would be like in 2050, and it was like 41 degrees Celsius in London. And of course, now it's 2022 and it's 41 degrees Celsius in London. And
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and one of the phenomena, so I've been doing climate stuff for 20 years. And when I first started, the data that I was using was from the IPCC. And they were projecting all of these nasty impacts of climate change towards the end of the century. And so sort of what we're seeing is this incredible contraction, if you like, in time. And how can we understand that if the best science at the time of a really well understood phenomena was given these projections out towards the end of the century when they're effectively 80 years earlier? How do we explain that?
Well, the science soon after the first assessment in 1990, which was probably the best assessment, to tell you the truth, the science of climate change switched from what we call theoretical science, right? And ecology and biology, it switched to modeling.
Right.
And as Professor James Lovelock said, and also one of the Russian experts that I spoke to on methane hydrate, models are all very well for qualitative change, to check that your computers say that what you expect to happen, right? Obviously, you have global surface warming, you're obviously going to get heat waves, you're obviously going to get droughts, you're obviously going to get forest fires.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we knew all that in 1990, and we knew that would be definite. But the science really has got more and more and more modeling.
Right.
And it's a bit chaotic, to tell you the truth. You probably remember in 2007 when we had that first big abrupt loss of Arctic sea ice, that suddenly the scientists said, well, wow, this isn't supposed to be happening until 2080, right?
Right, yes.
And then, of course, permafrost has always been one of our big worries, although the IPCC practically ignores it. But the permafrost is thawing in Alaska at a rate that the models project for 2090.
Right.
So we're looking at many, many, many decades in which, there's a saying amongst modelers that models are always wrong.
Yeah, of course.
And oh my gosh, this has certainly proved to be the fact. Now, I may be sounding critical, but actually I'm not, because of that horrible, aggressive climate denial campaign that was started by the by the fossil fuel industry, and they launched that in 1988.
Right.
When they heard that there might be a convention coming down, when they heard that there might be a new group of scientists. And what they did was they attacked the scientists. They literally attacked them. So that put us and science in the situation that we really were compelled to do what we shouldn't have needed to do, but to prove, right, to absolutely prove that climate change was real, right? And it was going to happen and it was going to increase. But this is so long ago.
Yeah, right.
that,
88. Yeah.
we were out of time about 10 years ago,
yeah. Yeah. I was watching an interview the other day. It's actually on CNN with a British scientist who works at the geosciences department at the University of Cambridge. And he was saying that he talks regularly to senior executives in fossil fuel industries, and what they are saying, or what he is saying they are saying, is that if there was regulation imposed by governments, that they would simply comply with regulation. If the governments regulated that all fossil fuel industries had to diversify into renewables over 10 years, they would just grumble, but they would get onto it because it would be applied consistently to the whole industry. And that was an interesting sort of observation. And I've heard that comment before from a property developer who was talking about green building design, which was that nobody wants to go first and innovate. But if the regulation came through, they'd all grumble because they'd have to make a change, but they'd all comply. And so then that comes back to this question that I've had for a long time, is where is the logjam? Why are we not seeing this rapid transitional change? And my theory had been all along is that the fossil fuel industries were just simply had no interest whatsoever in doing anything other than fossil fuels and maintaining their control over democratic systems through their lobbying and other probably nefarious means. So fundamentally, somewhere there's got to be some sort of a logjam, to use that sort of analogy of, logs flowing down a river and jamming. Where do you think the logjam is? Because something's completely jammed in the system.
Well, the denial campaign continues.
Yeah.
It's not hard to find.
Yeah.
It'll find you.
Yeah.
So that actually hasn't stopped. Like over the past 20 years, the more scientific evidence that we've got, both from the models and from the actual impacts, the more aggressive the climate denial campaign has become.
Yeah.
And they've really been horrible. They have picked on, there is a history that they've picked on certain climate scientists. And, Michael Mann was able to tolerate it. But he's made of tougher stuff than most climate experts are made of. And so the logjam is quite simply the big corporations, the big banks that finance the fossil fuel extraction.
Yeah, okay.
And of course, the fossil fuel corporations. Now, I have to have a bit of a laugh when I say that they're saying that give us regulation and an even playing field, because decades ago, I was involved in, myself and my environmental group, legally challenging some of the big corporations, one of them being Elcan. And they are ideologically, as they put it, opposed to regulation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They will not tolerate regulation. If any hint of regulation comes up, they will fight it tooth and nail.
Yeah, sure.
So we have a situation where we have what you can only call a real axis of evil, right?
Yeah.
We have the fossil fuel corporations, and all countries, the UK, where I'm from, there's new projects coming online all the time. They haven't slowed them down. And then, as I say, they're financed. Each of these huge fossil fuel projects requires financing by the banks, even Exxon, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, they need insurance for a large amount.
Yeah.
And they're all in the game of destroying the planet together. And of course, there's no governments that do not actually support them, because all governments, some are better than others, but all governments are continuing to subsidize the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
So at this stage in 2022, they know they're destroying the future.
Yeah.
They know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it's not a logjam per se, but it's a system, right? It's a system. The whole system is geared towards a particular direction, all the finance, the whole. And so this comes back to this question of what's motivating people. And, through, Vita's, what Vita Sapien has tried to sort of address or to tease out or understand is this sort of spiritual aspect to sustainability, the intersection of spirituality and sustainability, given that spirituality is something that underpins our beliefs, and our beliefs are the things that motivate our behavior. So if you, for example, like you're saying, these executives are fundamentally opposed to any form of regulation, that's grounded in something inside them. And so if we were to sort of assume that spirituality is this underlying motivation that drives effectively behavior, then the question is, how would we influence the spirituality of oil men to create eco-spirituality so that they start paying more attention to the well-being of Earth Mother? And there's a...
Well, I really like what you're doing, Guy. You're totally on the right track. And the huge thing that has been missing, because in my lifetime, it's progressively disappeared from our society, from our culture, is morality, ethics, a spiritual bond to Mother Nature, as it was when I was a boy in England, or to Mother Earth, as it still is, of course, to all the indigenous peoples. So that's gone. Now the CEOs are not going to make that change. But we need it. We really, really need it. We need to instill that back into our society. You know, no matter what the chances are, or matter what the future may look like, we really, really, really need that. Of course, you've got to remember that the corporations are a complete law unto themselves. They're nothing like our society. They're very, very much like the military. They're set up as a hierarchy, and as you go up in the hierarchy, you get more powerful, more aggressive. Some people would say more psychopathic. And, you know, they earn 20 billions and more, you know, money a year. And I've often wondered, well, why do they get that kind of money? And I think it's the price of a soul. I think a soul is still pretty pricey to buy.
And of course, the corporations, the actual structure of the corporation, there was a documentary series actually called The Corporation. And the picture on the cover was a businessman carrying a suitcase, but he had a devil's horns and a tail. And what they were basically saying in the doco was that if you actually look at the behavior of corporations, then they have the behavioral characteristics of a sociopathic human being, because they're a legal entity that has the same rights as humans in terms of being able to be sued and to own property and so forth, but they're guided by the governors, and the group decisions of the governors give the corporation the characteristic of a sociopathic person, basically. And so, but then that comes back to the idea that the governors are making decisions. And the other thing is, I've come through a master of business over the last few years. I actually completed my last assignment about a month and a half ago. And
that
was a master of business. And in equivalent about 3 years of full-time study, not once did anybody mention the fact that we live within a biosphere that has constraints. It was all focused around maximizing shareholder value. This is how you use marketing and advertising to sell more products. And so, and the reason I mention that is because apart from the souls of the governors of these corporations, they haven't been trained in ecosystems and ecology, right? So most of the people that are running these corporations are trained in finance or law or arcane aspects of business. And they probably don't understand how the ecosystem functions. And they probably don't even trust people that do understand how the ecosystem functions, because it's simply not their domain of knowledge. And so here's the sort of the great conundrum that we folk have got to get our head around, is how do we influence the system so that we can make some fundamental shift? Because is it true to say that there's been a really significant uptick just in the last, say, 2 or 3 years in extreme weather events? Or has it just been, am I just getting more feeds on my Facebook now? But
no. I mean, one of the big things, of course, that came out of the IPCC working group too, and was especially impressive because the IPCC is so conservative on making its conclusions, was, and they repeated it over and over. They were very good with the media, the IPCC. Extreme weather events are increasing. They're increasing due to human activities, human emissions, and they will continue to increase.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And at some point, like today, still the planet is governable, right? You know, this idea that if you get smashed by a tornado in Central America, in North America, that if you can rebuild and get your town back before the next tornado comes, then you maintain this sort of, capacity to move forward. But if you get hit by a tornado whilst you're still rebuilding, there's this ungovernableness. And my concern is that the planet is heading towards being ungovernable. And so, for example, just all of this drama with the war in Ukraine and the blockades of gas and the prices going up, potentially starts to open up all of this sort of civil strife in fragile countries, then the mass migration issues, then at some point the whole system, you're constantly chasing your tail. Governance, even in the wealthy countries, governors, the planet's going to spiral out of control. And that seems to be getting closer and closer. And these extreme weather events, for example, 40 Celsius in the UK, is just another example of that. And it's going to get worse because we haven't even fundamentally started to fix the problem, the underlying climate problem.
Yeah, and there's no intention. The powers and influences in the world have no intention. That became very clear in the debacle at the Glasgow United Nations COP26.
Yeah. When
there was a last-minute intervention by a few countries, and there was Ashok Sharma, the president for the UK, was actually amazingly good. For the first time in all these years, he got the word fossil fuels onto a draft agreement. That never ever happened before. Can you imagine it? You saw the drama. The media covered it. They did a hatchet job on it, and they ended up with nothing. And so we're back to the same thing. Year after year after year, these United Nations conferences. But our economy, as you no doubt know, is fundamentally geared not only to consumerism, not only to manufacturing as much stuff as is possible every single minute of every day, right? But it's also, it has levels and levels of protection.
Yeah.
And one just cannot sort of get in there. We've had some successes, a few. We've stopped some destruction of some rainforests in British Columbia. We've done that. But we can never change the economic system, which is an all-consuming system, and it's consuming now. Capitalism became pretty ugly when fossil fuels got involved.
Yeah.
Fossil fuel capitalism is very, very different from what we had before.
Yeah.
And it's very much linked up with war, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It amazes me that the big corporate banks stay under the radar.
Yeah.
Because these big banking corporations, they're in control, man. I mean, I think probably most people would realize that if you asked them. And they have one job only. Make the maximum amount of money every second of the day. Yeah. So you have to somehow imagine that one can get through that. And I agree with you. I do agree with you. The only way is to try and appeal, to some sense of conscience, to some sense of morality. I mean, my God, their own grandchildren are now being left a literal hell on earth.
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
We're at 1.12 degrees C global. We, of course, will be at 1.5 degrees C around 2030. Absolute minimum, we will be at 1.5. And imagine, of course, the big shock again to the science and the modelers, which I got to admit didn't surprise me that much. The big shock was that the initial IPCC and scientific models, which were what I think are called naive models, they actually projected that the global south, the tropics and the subtropics would be hit very badly. And it was in the IPCC early assessments, but the northern temperate hemisphere would not. The northern temperate hemisphere will be able to ride things out and even benefit from global surface warming by supposedly being able to grow more food. Well, of course, that's all gone by the board. So the big shocker is that the northern hemisphere is being hit so early. These heat waves, they're all being earliest on record. That they're being hit for so long. All of the extreme weather events are prolonged now. So, you know, you don't have a heat wave or a drought, you know, for maybe a week and then you're over it. Not anymore, because the Arctic currents have mixed up the jet stream and changed everything. The Arctic is completely changed. So I recall, you know, that I think it was probably back in 2010 that James Hansen presented his science as that the scientists were being lulled into a Faustian bargain. I thought that was pretty brave of him, you know, Faustus selling his soul to the devil for money. But that's what we're looking at. The one thing that amazes me is that people just can't see how criminally evil this is. You know, I mean, they're seeing the planet. I mean, for heaven's sake, life is disappearing around us, right? I mean, here I am in south coastal British Columbia, that used to be one of the biodiversity rich hotspots in the world, right? We now are struggling we have a salmon survival project. Can you imagine? Between the United States and between Canada. And you know, if I see a butterfly, one butterfly, you know, I'm surprised and delighted. We know we're losing our insects. That's been confirmed now over and over. The insect apocalypse is definitely real. And there's so many. One thing that I've tried to communicate over the years is that the biosphere is being assaulted on all fronts. Every system of the biosphere is under assault. It's under assault by our consumer economy, obviously, you know. And of course, there's many people who have pointed out that it's not going to work. You can't have exponential economic growth, which means exponential consumption, exponential pollution, and hope to have a future. So, but you know, those people, they weren't really listened to. And you remember Rex Tillerson, the CEO of Exxon?
Tex Tillerson.
I followed the so-called very, very well-intentioned what they call shareholder revolts. And they had about 3 of them, I remember. And Tillerson really went into them. And I can remember him saying, at the final conference on one of them, here's a quote: "They are going to depend on fossil fuels in 2030, whether they like it or not." So that's the mentality, right? That's the mentality. And you remember that when Trump chose him as Secretary of State, right? Of course, he was grilled, right? So he was asked about climate change. He said, "Oh, no. I know climate change. It's a technological problem. That's what climate change is, right?"
Hey, Peter, I just had a little message flash up saying that because I haven't subscribed to Zoom, this is going to close down in about 5 minutes. So what I want to do is I want to close this and then open another one and come back to this conversation. Is that okay?
Do I have to hit another Zoom?
Yeah, I'm going to have to. You just stay there,
Right.
but I'll send you the new link on the email in about a minute. All right.
Okay, got it.
And then I'll cut these two together. So stand by. So I'll just close this. Here we go. Stop.